What does it cost to be a hero? For Liam Blackwood, a single father struggling to make ends meet, the price was the flesh on his hands. When the annual Sterling Industries Gala erupted in flames, he didn't hesitate. He heard a scream and ran towards the inferno, towards the daughter of the city's most powerful CEO. He saved her life, but in the searing heat, his own life was forged into something new and terrifying. He thought the fire was the worst of his problems. He was wrong. The burns healed impossibly fast his secret nature, straining at its leash, and the girl's father, a man with limitless resources and chilling secrets of his own, refused to let him go. Liam had saved the princess only to find himself a prisoner in the king's castle, a castle built on lies that could destroy him and the son he lived for. The air, thick with the scent of popcorn and cotton candy, was a battlefield for Liam's senses. Every laugh, every shout from the children on the carousel, every chord from the live band was a distinct note in a chaotic symphony. He kept one hand firmly on his 7-year-old son's shoulder, a grounding touch in the vibrant crush of the Sterling Industries Founders' Day Gala. It was an extravagant affair for the public, a calculated display of corporate benevolence. For Liam and his son Noah, it was a rare night out, a welcome distraction from their cramped apartment and the ever-present stack of unpaid bills. "Dad, can I get a balloon sword?" Noah yelled over the music, his eyes wide with a wonder that made Liam's heart ache. "Finish your hot dog first, champ?" Liam said, his voice a low rumble. He scanned the crowd, a habit he couldn't break. His gaze drifted over the families, the corporate suits, the smiling faces, and landed on a gilded pavilion at the center of the fairgrounds. A sign above it read, "The Sterling Maze of Mirrors." It was a temporary 2-story structure designed to entertain the children of the city's elite. Inside that pavilion, laughing with her friends, was Isabella Sterling. At 24, she was the heiress to the Sterling Empire, a name synonymous with power and innovation. To the public, she was a beautiful face in society pages. To her father, Alistair Sterling, she was his most precious asset, guarded more fiercely than any corporate secret. Liam's attention snapped back to Noah as his son tugged on his sleeve. "Done sword time." Liam chuckled and was about to head toward the balloon artist when a new scent cut through the cacophony of smells. It was sharp, acrid, and utterly wrong. Smoke. Not the pleasant smoke of a barbecue pit, but the greasy chemical stench of burning plastic and wood. His head whipped around his nostrils, flaring. A thin grey tendril was curling from the top of the maze of mirrors. Panic was a slow ripple at first, then a tidal wave. A few people pointed their voices, rising in alarm. The music faltered and died. Then the first scream. Within seconds, the grey tendril became a thick black plume. Orange light flickered within the pavilion's windows like a monstrous heartbeat. People were scrambling, a chaotic exodus away from the structure. Liam grabbed Noah, hoisting him into his arms. "Stay with me, Noah. Don't let go." He was pushing through the panicked crowd, moving away like everyone else when he heard it. It wasn't a scream of fear, but a cry of pure terror, followed by a desperate shout for help. It was a young woman's voice, and it was coming from inside the burning maze. Every primal instinct, every fiber of his being screamed at him to run to protect his son. But the part of him that was more than human, the part he fought every single day to control, could not ignore the sound of a life in peril. He saw a frantic security guard speaking into his radio, his face pale. "Someone's still in there." It's Miss Sterling. Liam's blood ran cold. He looked at Noah, whose face was buried in his shoulder. He spotted a woman he vaguely recognized from his apartment building, Mrs. Gable, huddled with her family. He ran to her, his movements unnaturally swift. "Please," he said, his voice tight with urgency as he placed Noah in her arms. "Please look after him. Just for a minute." Mrs. Gable was too stunned to argue, simply nodding as she pulled Noah close. Dad Noah cried, reaching for him. "I'll be right back, Noah, I promise," Liam yelled, turning back to the inferno. He tore off his flannel shirt, wrapping it around his nose and mouth. The heat was a physical blow, a solid wall he had to force his way through. The entrance to the maze was choked with smoke flames, already licking at the ornate facade. He didn't hesitate. He plunged inside. The interior was a nightmare. The mirrors that were meant to delight now reflected 1,000 versions of the fire, creating a disorienting hellscape of light and shadow. Smoke clawed at his lungs, and the heat was immense, blistering his exposed skin. His enhanced senses, usually a secret advantage, were a curse here. He could hear the groan of dying wood, smell the specific toxins in the smoke, and feel the vibrations of the structure as it began to fail. "Help, please!" "I'm trapped." The voice was weaker now, punctuated by coughing. Liam followed the sound, his movements guided by pure instinct. He shattered mirrors with his fists, the glass crunching under his boots, ignoring the searing pain as shards sliced into his knuckles. He found her on the second floor, pinned beneath a heavy, smouldering oak beam that had fallen from the ceiling. It was Isabella Sterling. Her beautiful dress was torn and scorched her face, smudged with soot, and her leg was trapped at an unnatural angle. "I can't move it," she gasped, her eyes wide with terror and pain. The fire was roaring around them, devouring the walls. Liam knew they had seconds. He crouched, his muscles coiling. He gripped the beam. The wood was scorching, the heat so intense it felt like his hands were melting. He roared a sound that was not entirely human and heaved. The beam, weighing hundreds of pounds, lifted. The muscles in his back and shoulders screamed in protest, and the skin on his palms and fingers sizzled, the smell of his own burning flesh mixing with the smoke. Isabella scrambled free, crying out as she put weight on her injured leg. Liam let the beam crash back down and swept her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected. He turned and ran, navigating the labyrinthine horror on memory and instinct alone. A section of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending a shower of sparks and embers down on them. He shielded her with his body, gritting his teeth as burning debris rained down on his back. He burst out of the entrance just as the entire structure groaned and folded in on itself with a deafening crash. He stumbled onto the grass, his lungs hewing, and gently laid Isabella down as paramedics swarmed them. He saw her father, Alistair Sterling, push through the line of firefighters, his face a mask of cold fury and sheer terror. Isabella Alistair's voice was like cracking ice. Liam's vision began to tunnel. The pain in his hands was a white-hot agony, a blinding, all-consuming fire that raced up his arms. He looked down and saw them. They were barely recognizable as hands, the skin blackened and blistered, cooked raw. He heard Noah screaming his name somewhere in the distance. He saw Alistair Sterling's eyes, sharp, analytical, and full of suspicion, lock on to his before the world dissolved into blackness. Liam awoke to the rhythmic, sterile beep of a heart monitor and the smell of antiseptic. For a confusing moment, he thought he was back in the emergency room after the car crash that had taken his wife Eleanor 5 years ago. But this wasn't the chaotic, crowded county hospital. The room was vast and silent, bathed in the soft, ambient light of early morning, filtering through a floor-to-ceiling window. The sheets beneath him were impossibly soft, the bed more comfortable than any he had ever known. He tried to sit up, and a jolt of pain shot through him, originating from his hands. He looked down. Both hands and forearms were swathed in thick white bandages. The throbbing was a dull, persistent echo of the agony he'd felt before passing out. "I wouldn't move too much if I were you." The voice was calm and cultured, yet held an undeniable edge of authority. Alistair Sterling stood near the window, a silhouette against the dawn. He was impeccably dressed in a dark grey suit, looking as though he'd just stepped out of a boardroom, not a hospital waiting room. "My son." Noah Liam's voice was a rough rasp. "He is perfectly fine," Sterling said, turning. His face was severe, etched with lines of stress and lack of sleep. But his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "He's with a childminder in the suite next door. My people retrieved your friend Mrs. Gable's contact information and assured her you were both in good hands." Liam sagged back into the pillows with relief. "And your daughter Isabella has a fractured tibia and moderate smoke inhalation. She will make a full recovery. Thanks to you." The word sounded less like a statement of gratitude and more like an assessment of fact. Sterling walked closer to the bed. "The doctors are quite amazed, Mr. Blackwood. They've never seen third-degree burns begin the granulation process so quickly. Your cellular regeneration is, and I quote, medically astonishing." Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. It was happening already. The secret he'd guarded his entire life, the very reason he and Noah lived in obscurity, was threatening to unravel because of one impulsive act of heroism. "Lucky genes, I guess," he mumbled, trying to sound nonchalant. Alistair's lips thinned into a semblance of a smile. It didn't reach his eyes. Indeed. Liam Blackwood, 32 years old, widower, works as a freelance carpenter and mechanic. You have no living relatives on record. You and your son moved to the city 3 years ago, from a small, unincorporated town in the northern mountains that was wiped off the map by a forest fire a decade ago. You live a quiet, almost invisible life." The man hadn't just been waiting. He'd been digging. Liam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool hospital air. "You saved my daughter's life," Alistair continued, his tone shifting from analytical to transactional. He pulled a checkbook and a gold pen from his inner jacket pocket. "I am a man who pays his debts. Name a number. Whatever it is, I'll write it." Liam looked from the checkbook to the powerful man holding it. He thought of the stack of bills, the constant worry about rent, the fact that Noah needed new shoes. He could solve all his problems with a single word. But accepting this man's money felt like selling a piece of himself, like putting a price on an instinct. It felt wrong. "I don't want your money, Mr. Sterling," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm glad your daughter is okay, that's all." Alistair Sterling paused his pen, hovering over the check. He seemed genuinely surprised, and for a moment the mask of control slipped. He studied Liam, his gaze intensifying, searching. Suspicion flickered in his eyes again. People like Alistair Sterling didn't understand altruism. They understood leverage transactions and hidden motives. A man with nothing refusing a fortune was not noble in his world. He was an anomaly, and anomalies were dangerous. "Everyone wants something," Sterling stated, snapping the checkbook shut. "If not money, then what? A better job, a better life for your son." "My hands are useless right now," Liam admitted, gesturing with a bandaged arm. "I can't work. I can't provide for my son. That's my only concern." Alistair nodded slowly, a plan already forming behind his cold eyes. "Very well. Your recovery will be extensive. You and your son will be my guests. I have a cottage on my estate, fully staffed. You'll have the best medical care. When you've recovered, I'll offer you a position at Sterling Industries, head of maintenance for the estate grounds. The salary will be more than you make in 5 years as a carpenter." It was a gilded cage, and Liam knew it. The offer was too generous, the solution too perfect. Sterling wasn't being kind. He was being strategic. He wanted to keep the medical anomaly who had saved his daughter close, where he could be watched, studied, and controlled. But what choice did Liam have? He was injured, unemployed, and responsible for a child. Refusing would be an act of foolish pride that would only hurt Noah. Why, Liam asked, meeting the CEO's gaze. Why do all this? As I said, I pay my debts, Alistair replied smoothly. And I like to keep assets close. You, Mr. Blackwood, have proven to be a significant asset. He straightened his tie. A car will be waiting to transport you and your son to the estate as soon as the doctors discharge you. Welcome to your new life. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Liam alone, with the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, and the terrifying realization that in saving Isabella Sterling, he had just lost the one thing he valued most, his freedom. His life had turned upside down, and he was falling into a world of wealth and power where his secrets could not possibly stay buried for long. The Sterling estate was not a home. It was a kingdom. A winding private road led through acres of ancient forest before opening onto manicured lawns that rolled like a green sea toward a mansion of stone and glass. It was a fortress of wealth, imposing and beautiful. The guest cottage Liam and Noah were led to was larger and more luxurious than any house Liam had ever lived in. It had granite countertops, plush furniture, and a refrigerator stocked with more food than he and Noah saw in a month. Noah was ecstatic. He ran through the cottage, marveling at the soft carpets and the television that was bigger than their old kitchen table. For him, this was a magical adventure. For Liam, it was a prison. Every window seemed to have a view of the main house. He felt the constant unseen weight of surveillance cameras and the watchful eyes of the uniformed security guards who patrolled the perimeter. A private nurse, a stern woman named Helen, came twice a day to change his bandages. The conversation was always the same. Remarkable healing, she would say, her professional curiosity barely masking her suspicion. The inflammation is almost gone. At this rate, you'll have minimal scarring. Liam would just nod and offer a weak smile, all while hiding the truth beneath the gauze. His skin was already smooth and pink, the new tissue regenerating at a supernatural rate. The fire had happened only a week ago, but his hands were almost completely healed. He had to fake the pain, had to pretend to wince when he moved. His fingers had to keep the bandages on, long past the point of needing them. It was an exhausting, terrifying performance. His first official meeting with Isabella since the fire took place a few days after their arrival. She found him sitting on the porch of the cottage, staring out at the woods that bordered the property. Her leg was in a sleek carbon fiber cast, and she walked with the aid of crutches, but her eyes were clear and bright. "The hero looks pensive," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that was entirely absent in her father's. Liam stood up immediately. "Ms. Sterling, you should be resting. Please call me Isabella. And I've been resting for days. I was going crazy." She maneuvered herself to sit on the porch swing. "I never properly thanked you, Liam. You saved my life. I just did what anyone would have," he said, repeating the line he'd given her father, though it felt different saying it to her. "No," she said, looking him directly in the eyes. "They didn't. Everyone else was running away. You were the only one who ran toward it." Her gaze dropped to his bandaged hands. "How are they getting better?" He lied, tucking them into his pockets. An easy silence fell between them. It wasn't awkward, but filled with a strange, unspoken understanding. Liam felt a pull toward her, a dangerous magnetism he knew he had to resist. She was the sun and he was a creature of the moon. Their worlds were never meant to intersect. "My father can be overbearing," Isabella said as if reading his mind. "This place, it can feel like a cage sometimes. I hope you and Noah are comfortable." "Noah thinks he's died and gone to heaven," Liam said with a genuine smile. "He's just happy. That's all that matters." Her expression softened. "You're a good father." The compliment landed with more weight than he expected. They talked for over an hour, about books, about the city, about Noah's love for dinosaurs. Liam found himself relaxing in her presence, forgetting for a moment the precariousness of his situation. She was nothing like her father. She was kind, genuine, and carried a sadness in her eyes that mirrored his own. But as the days bled into weeks, a familiar anxiety began to coil in his gut. The moon was waxing, growing from a sliver to a pregnant orb in the night sky. The full moon was approaching. Back at his old apartment, he had a routine. He would lock himself in the reinforced bedroom chain himself to a bolt he'd drilled into the concrete floor and ride out the agonizing transformation alone. Here in this glass house of a cottage on an estate, crawling with security, there was nowhere to hide. The proximity to so many people, the constant stress of his deception, and the unfamiliar territory made the wolf inside him restless. It paced the confines of his soul, snarling, hungry for release. His senses sharpened to an agonizing degree. He could hear conversations in the main house, smell the perfume on a maid walking 100 yards away. His temper grew short, his body thrumming with a violent energy he could barely contain. He had to get away. His new job as head of maintenance was a farce. He reported to the estate manager, a man named Peters, who gave him simple tasks that could be done with one hand, clearly on Alistair Sterling's orders. It was during one of these tasks, inspecting the irrigation system near the edge of the property, that he found a potential sanctuary. The estate was bordered by a dense, ancient forest part of a state reserve. A high-tech fence marked the property line, but Liam noticed a section where a fallen tree had damaged a sensor panel, a blind spot. It was a risk, a huge one, but it was a better option than transforming in the cottage and slaughtering the CEO's prize-winning roses, or worse. The night of the full moon arrived cold and clear. The lunar light painted the world in shades of silver and black. Liam tucked Noah into bed, reading him a story until his son's breathing evened out into the soft rhythm of sleep. Every instinct screamed at him to stay to protect his child, but the change was coming. The pain was starting in his bones, a deep cellular fire that was a prelude to the breaking and reshaping. He scribbled a note, went for a walk, "Be back soon," and left it on the kitchen counter. He slipped out of the cottage, moving through the shadows, every nerve ending alive. The air was electric. He reached the blind spot in the fence, his body already contorting in the first waves of the transformation. He squeezed through the gap, ignoring the tear in his shirt, and stumbled into the darkness of the woods. He ran, wanting to put as much distance as possible between the beast he was becoming and the fragile world he was so desperate to protect. He didn't know that from a second-story window in the main house, Isabella Sterling watched him go. She had been worried about him all day. He had been pale, his hands trembling, his eyes holding a haunted feral light she couldn't decipher. She saw him slip through the fence and disappear into the forbidding woods. Compelled by a concern that defied logic, she grabbed a flashlight and a coat, and against her better judgment, decided to follow him. Life on the Sterling estate settled into a tense rhythm. By day, Liam was the quiet, grateful hero performing his light duties and sharing brief, charged conversations with Isabella. By night, he was a prisoner of his own secrets, meticulously planning for the next full moon and investigating the fire that had brought him here. His senses, even in human form, told him the fire was no accident. He remembered the chemical smell of an accelerant beneath the scent of burning wood. During his maintenance rounds, He discreetly examined the security logs for the night of the gala. He found a strange anomaly, a 10-minute-long power fluctuation at the security hub that controlled the cameras around the pavilion, occurring just minutes before the first reports of smoke. The outage was localized precise. It wasn't a glitch, it was sabotage. He also learned more about Sterling Industries. It wasn't just a tech conglomerate. Its most profitable and secretive division was its private security and biogenetics wing. They developed cutting-edge surveillance systems, non-lethal weaponry, and as Liam discovered with a jolt of ice in his veins, sophisticated sonic deterrents. One of the top-selling models, the SD-7 K9 deterrent, was marketed for crowd control and high-security perimeter defense. Its specifications mentioned a frequency range that was imperceptible to humans, but excruciatingly effective against the advanced hearing of canids. Liam knew it would be torture for a werewolf. Alistair Sterling wasn't just powerful. His company manufactured weapons that could be used against his kind. His relationship with Isabella deepened, evolving from gratitude to a genuine, dangerous affection. They'd meet on the sprawling lawns under the guise of her getting fresh air for her healing leg. She spoke of her mother who had passed away when she was a teenager, and the suffocating loneliness of living under her father's thumb. Liam, in turn, spoke of Eleanor, his late wife, and the challenges of raising Noah alone. He was careful editing his past, replacing the truth of pack life with vague stories of a small, tight-knit community. "You never talk about your family," she observed one afternoon, her head tilted with curiosity. "Your parents, siblings. We had a falling out a long time ago." Liam said, the lie tasting like ash. "We don't speak." The truth was far more brutal. He had been an Omega in the Blackwood Pack, a pack ruled by a tyrannical alpha who saw compassion as weakness. He had challenged the alpha's law defending another family and had been exiled, branded a traitor. Elena, who was human, had left with him. They had been alone on the run ever since. The past he had run from finally caught up to him one rainy Tuesday. He was heading back to the cottage when a sleek, black car pulled up beside him. The tinted window slid down, revealing a face he had prayed he would never see again. Marcus Thorne, the new alpha of the Blackwood Pack. He had the same cruel eyes as his father, the alpha Liam had defied. Liam Marcus, said his voice, a low, mocking purr, living in the lap of luxury. "I have to say I'm impressed. And here we all thought you were dead." Liam's body went rigid. He instinctively shielded the path to his cottage, where Noah would be with the minder. "What do you want, Marcus?" "What I've always wanted. What's rightfully mine." Marcus's eyes glittered with malice. "Our pack's lore speaks of a relic hidden by your great-grandfather, a moonstone, said to amplify an alpha's power. Your family were its keepers before your pathetic father lost his status. I know you know where it is." Liam's blood ran cold. The moonstone of Ethel was real, a dangerous artifact he had sworn to keep hidden. His father had entrusted its location to him on his deathbed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Don't lie to me, Omega. I've been tracking you for years. I know about the boy. He's starting to get the scent, isn't he? The wolf is waking up in him." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Give me the stone, or I'll tell your gracious host, Mr. Sterling, exactly what kind of animal he's let into his home. I've seen the news, read about his company. I wonder how he'd react to learning his daughter's hero is a monster. I could even tell him where to find silver bullets. The threat hung in the air, suffocating and absolute. Marcus was a cornered wolf, more dangerous than ever. His pack was weakening, and he saw the moonstone as his salvation. You find what you're looking for?" Marcus snarled, his patience gone. You have until the next full moon, or your boy and your pretty little heiress pay the price." The window slid up and the car sped away, leaving Liam standing in the rain, his carefully constructed world shattering around him. He was trapped between two monsters, a ruthless alpha from his past and a suspicious billionaire in his present, with the two people he loved most caught in the crossfire. The days leading up to the full moon were a special kind of hell. Marcus Thorne's threat was a poison seeping into every moment, making Liam paranoid and volatile. The wolf inside him sensed the danger, pacing restlessly, its hackles raised. He was short-tempered with the staff, distant with Noah, and avoidant of Isabella, who watched him with growing concern in her eyes. The strain of his deception, coupled with the imminent transformation, and Marcus's ultimatum, was pushing him to the breaking point. On the night of the full moon, a palpable tension hung over the estate. Liam felt as if his skin were too tight, his nerves stretched to wires. He put Noah to bed, his hands trembling as he smoothed his son's hair. "I love you, buddy. More than anything, I love you too, Dad." Noah mumbled sleepily. "Are you okay? You look sad." "Just tired, champ," Liam whispered, his throat tight. He waited until Noah was sound asleep before slipping out of the cottage. He moved like a wraith through the manicured gardens, his senses already beginning to sharpen and distort. The scent of night-blooming jasmine was overpowering. The chirp of a cricket sounded like a shriek, and the moonlight felt like a physical weight on his skin. He reached the damaged section of the fence and squeezed through the first tremor of the change racking his body. Pain, white-hot and blinding, lanced through his joints. His bones were beginning to stretch and crack. He needed to get deep into the woods, far away from anyone. But he hadn't been as stealthy as he thought. From her bedroom window, Isabella had seen the taut, haunted look on his face all day. She saw him sneak away from the cottage, his movements furtive and strange. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach. She thought of the fire, of the impossible way he had lifted that beam. She thought of his hands, which she'd caught a glimpse of when a bandage had slipped, revealing smooth, unblemished skin where horrific burns should have been. None of it made sense. Driven by an instinct she couldn't explain, she pulled on a jacket and, ignoring the dull ache in her leg, followed him. She kept her distance, using the trees for cover. She saw him slip through the fence and followed, her heart pounding. The forest was a different world at night, full of menacing shadows and strange noises. She kept the beam of her flashlight pointed at the ground, tracking the path he took. She found him in a small clearing, bathed in the ethereal light of the full moon, and what she saw made her freeze, her mind refusing to process the image. Liam was on his knees, his back arched, his head thrown back in a silent scream. His body was convulsing, changing. She saw his fingers elongate into claws, his shoulders broaden and hunch as dark fur sprouted across his skin. His face contorted, his jaw lengthening into a muzzle, and then she saw his eyes. They flashed open, glowing with a terrifying golden luminescence. It was a look of pure, untamed wildness. She stifled a scream, clamping a hand over her mouth as she stumbled backward, her flashlight falling to the ground. The sound of the clatter, though small, was deafening in the charged silence. The creature, the wolf that was Liam, whipped its head around its glowing eyes, locking onto her. A low, guttural growl rumbled from its chest, a sound that vibrated deep in her bones. This was not the kind, gentle man who had saved her. This was a monster. Before she could run, before the wolf could take another step, the night exploded. A net woven with what looked like silver wire shot out from the trees and enveloped the wolf, pulling it to the ground. The creature roared in agony as the silver seared its flesh. 3 figures dressed in black tactical gear emerged from the shadows armed with rifles. They weren't Sterling's security. Got him, one of them said into a radio. The Alpha was right. He's here. Marcus's men. They hadn't waited. Isabella was paralyzed with terror. One of the men saw her. We have a witness. Thorne's orders were no witnesses. He raised his rifle, the barrel aimed squarely at her chest. Time seemed to slow down. Isabella closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. But it never came. A deafening roar of pure fury ripped through the clearing. The wolf, driven by a protective instinct that transcended the pain, surged against the net. With a sound of tearing metal and sinew, it ripped itself free, silver wires digging deep into its hide. It was no longer just a beast. It was a guardian. Ignoring its own searing wounds, it launched itself at the man aiming at Isabella. It was a blur of black fur and flashing claws. The man screamed as the wolf slammed into him, his rifle flying from his grasp. The other 2 opened fire, but the wolf was unnaturally fast, a phantom of rage and pain. It disarmed the second man with a brutal swipe of its claws and turned on the third. Isabella watched, horrified and mesmerized. This savage creature was protecting her. It was Liam. The third man, seeing his partners incapacitated, pulled out a long, wicked-looking knife with a silver blade. As the wolf lunged, he sidestepped and drove the blade deep into its shoulder. The wolf let out a pained howl that was heart-wrenchingly familiar, sounding almost like Liam's voice. It staggered back, the silver knife, acting like a poison, its supernatural strength draining away. It collapsed onto the forest floor, its massive form beginning to shrink and contort. The transformation was reversing, forced by the shock and the silver wound. The hunter stood over the writhing form, raising the knife for a final blow. "No!" Isabella screamed, finally finding her voice. She grabbed the heavy flashlight from the ground and, fueled by adrenaline, charged him. She swung it with all her might, connecting with the side of his head. He grunted and staggered, surprised by the attack, giving the shrinking form on the ground precious seconds. The transformation completed with a final shuddering gasp. Lying on the ground, bleeding profusely from a grotesque wound in his shoulder, was Liam. He was naked, pale, and horribly human, the last vestiges of the wolf fading from his features. The secret was out, laid bare, in the terrifying moonlit clearing. Isabella stared from the unconscious hunters to the man bleeding on the forest floor, her world completely and irrevocably shattered. The clearing was a tableau of chaos. 2 of Marcus's men were unconscious, the third groaning as he tried to sit up. And at the center of it all was Liam, bleeding, vulnerable, his body shivering from shock and the trauma of the forced reversal. His secret lay exposed between them, more shocking than the violence that had just occurred. Isabella's mind reeled. A wolf, a werewolf. The concept was absurd, something from folklore and horror movies. Yet she had seen it with her own eyes. The impossible transformation, the glowing eyes, the raw power. And she had seen that same creature, that monster, tear itself apart to protect her. Her fear, sharp and cold only moments before, was replaced by a wave of fierce, unreasoning protectiveness. Her medical instincts, honed by 2 years of nursing school before she dropped out under her father's pressure, took over. She dropped to her knees beside Liam, her hands hovering over the terrible wound in his shoulder. The knife was still embedded there, its silver handle gleaming in the moonlight. The flesh around it was blackened and sizzling as if burned by acid. It wasn't bleeding like a normal wound. It was festering the poison of the silver, actively destroying the tissue. "Don't touch it," Liam gasped, his voice thin and strained. "The silver, it stops the healing. We have to get it out," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "We have to get you help. No hospitals. He gritted out, his eyes screwed shut in pain. They'll ask questions. They'll see. He didn't need to finish. They would see his impossible biology. He would become a specimen, a lab rat. And Noah? What would happen to Noah? Just then, the sound of approaching vehicles and shouting men filled the air. The estate's security team, alerted by the gunshots, was descending on their position. Bright searchlights cut through the trees, sweeping across the clearing and freezing them in their glare. Seconds later, Alistair Sterling strode into the clearing, flanked by 4 of his most elite guards. He took in the scene with a glance, the downed men in tactical gear, his daughter on her knees, covered in dirt, and the half-naked bleeding form of Liam Blackwood. His cold eyes narrowed, missing nothing from the strange, silver-handled knife to the unnatural burn of the wound. "Coupler, get away from him," Alistair commanded, his voice like the crack of a whip. "No." Isabella shot back, instinctively shielding Liam's body with her own. "He's hurt. He saved me." "Saved you?" Alistair's gaze was glacial as he looked at Liam. "Or attacked you? What is going on here?" His security chief, Peters, knelt and checked one of Marcus's men. "They're not our people, sir. Armed. Professional." He pulled the silver knife from Liam's shoulder with a sickening squelch. Liam cried out, his body arching in agony. Peters examined the blade. "Sir!" "This is solid silver." Alistair's eyes locked onto Liam's. All the pieces clicked into place for him. The impossible heroism at the fire, the medically astonishing regeneration, the secrecy, the fight in the woods, the silver weapon. The suspicion that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted into a cold, terrifying certainty. His expression changed from confusion to one of utter revulsion and understanding. He now saw Liam not as a man, but as a thing, an infestation. "I want him in the medical wing." Level 5 containment protocol, Alistair ordered his men, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Secure him. If he so much as twitches, you put him down." The guards moved forward, their weapons raised. "Stop it!" Isabella screamed, standing up to face her father. For the first time in her life, she didn't shrink from his authority. Her eyes blazed with a fire he had never seen before. "These men attacked us. Liam was protecting me. They were going to kill me, and he stopped them. He is not what you think he is," Alistair said, his voice dangerously low. "You are in shock. You don't understand the threat you're defending." "I understand everything," she retorted, her voice breaking. "I saw it all. And I don't care. He protected me. That's more than your security did." The accusation hit its mark. Alistair flinched. Liam, delirious with pain, tried to push himself up. "Noah!" He rasped, his only thought for his son. "My son? He's alone." Alistair looked down at Liam with contempt. "Your son is now leverage. You will cooperate. You will tell me everything, or you will never see that boy again." He turned to his men. "Take him." As the guards grabbed Liam's arms, hauling his limp body up, Isabella made a desperate choice. She knew her father's ruthlessness. She knew what he was capable of when he perceived a threat to his control. Liam wouldn't survive an interrogation in a containment cell. "If you hurt him," she said, her voice trembling but full of steel, "if you lay one more hand on him, I will walk out of that gate and go straight to the press. I will tell them everything. About the faulty wiring in the pavilion your company signed off on. About the security cameras that were mysteriously offline. I will tell them you covered up corporate negligence that almost got me killed. I will ruin you." Alistair Sterling froze. He turned slowly to face his daughter. He saw no fear in her eyes, only the unwavering conviction of a woman who had found something worth fighting for. He had raised her to be a Sterling, intelligent, poised and compliant. He had never imagined she would turn that Sterling intelligence against him. He stared at her, then at the pathetic, bleeding creature his men were holding. A monster had saved his daughter. And his daughter was now willing to destroy his empire for that same monster. The world had ceased to make sense. Put him in one of the guest suites, Alistair finally bit out his jaw tight with fury. Post a guard. Get Dr. Orris here immediately. And not a word of this to anyone. He looked at Isabella, his eyes promising a reckoning. We are going to have a talk. The guest suite was transformed into a makeshift infirmary and prison. A stony-faced guard stood outside the door, while Dr. Aris Alistair's personal physician worked on Liam. The doctor, a man accustomed to discretion and odd requests, cleaned and stitched the wound, his brow furrowed at the strange way Liam's body fought against the lingering effects of the silver. The poison made the healing sluggish and painful, but it was still happening, the flesh slowly knitting itself back together. Isabella refused to leave his side. She argued with the doctor about treatment, held Liam's hand, when spasms of pain racked his body and met her father's cold fury with a resolve of her own. Alistair Sterling confronted them both as soon as Dr. Aris had left. This changes nothing, he said, his voice a low threat directed at Liam. You are a threat, a non-human entity on my property near my daughter. My name is Liam, he said, pushing himself into a sitting position against the headboard, the effort costing him. And I have never and would never harm Isabella. Your very existence is a harm, Alistair snapped. What are you? Where do you come from? Are there more of you? Before Liam could answer, his blood ran cold. He smelled him, a scent of rain-soaked earth and bloodlust. Marcus. He wasn't just sending his men anymore. He was here, and with Liam weakened, there was only one target left. Noah Liam whispered, his eyes wide with panic. He threw the blankets off and tried to stand, but his legs buckled the silver still potent in his system. He's after my son. Isabella rushed to his side. What is it? What's wrong? The Alpha I told you about. The one who sent those men. He's here, on the estate. He's going for Noah. Alistair scoffed. My security is the best in the world. The perimeter is flawless. Nothing gets on this estate without my knowing. As if on cue, the power in the suite died. The lights went out. The guard's radio crackled with static, and then silence. A backup generator kicked in a moment later, casting the room in dim emergency lighting, but the message was clear. The security had been breached. Alistair's face went pale. He pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. A professional high-level comms jammer. My son is in the cottage, Liam said, his voice desperate, as he leaned on Isabella for support. He'll be alone. The childminder leaves at 9. For the first time, Alistair saw not a monster, but a father terrified for his child. It was a look he knew intimately, a reflection of the terror he'd felt, seeing the pavilion in flames. He made a split-second decision, his priorities shifting from managing a threat to neutralizing an invasion. Peters. He barked into his personal satellite phone, which bypassed the jammer. Hostile on property. Full lockdown. Converge on guest cottage Alpha. Highest priority is the boy. Use of lethal force is authorized. He looked at Liam. Can you fight? Liam nodded, gritting his teeth. I have to. Then come on, Alistair said, turning to leave. He paused and looked at Isabella. Stay here. Lock this door. I'm coming with you, she said, her chin set stubbornly. Isabella, this is not a negotiation. Liam can barely stand, she argued. He'll need my help. I'm not leaving him. Alistair's jaw clenched, but there was no time to argue. He gave a sharp nod. Together, the unlikely trio, the billionaire, the werewolf, and the heiress, ran out into the chaos. They found the cottage door torn from its hinges. Inside the place was a wreck. The childminder was unconscious on the floor, and Noah was gone. A large, wolf-like creature, Marcus in his shifted form, was leaping through the shattered back window, a terrified Noah clutched in his massive jaws. Noah Liam screamed a father's primal roar of despair. Adrenaline and rage surged through Liam, overriding the pain. He broke into a sprint that was almost inhumanly fast, chasing Marcus across the lawn toward the woods. Alistair's security team was closing in their flashlight beams, cutting across the grounds. "Hold your fire. The boy is with him," Alistair commanded into his phone. Liam tackled Marcus just at the edge of the forest. The two werewolves, one weakened and one at full power, crashed to the ground in a flurry of snarls and claws. Noah was thrown clear, landing hard, but scrambling away in terror. "Get Noah!" Liam yelled to Isabella, who was right behind him. Isabella ran to the crying boy, scooping him up and pulling him back toward her father, as the two beasts fought with a savagery that defied description. Marcus was stronger, larger, and uninjured. He slashed at Liam, his claws tearing deep gouges in Liam's chest and arms. But Liam fought with the desperation of a father protecting his child. He was relentless, ignoring his own wounds, his only goal to keep Marcus from getting to his son. Alistair, watching the brutal fight, saw his moment. Marcus had Liam pinned, his jaws snapping inches from Liam's throat. Peter's Alistair said calmly into his phone, "The hostile is the larger of the two. Take the shot." A single muffled crack echoed from the roof of the main house. A silver-tipped dart developed in a Sterling Industries lab for just such a contingency sprouted from Marcus's flank. The powerful Alpha froze a look of shock in his wolfish eyes. He shuddered, then collapsed, the potent sedative instantly neutralizing him. Liam shoved the massive form off him and staggered to his feet. He stumbled toward Noah, who was crying in Isabella's arms. Liam fell to his knees, pulling his son into a hug, his body trembling with relief and exhaustion. Alistair Sterling watched the scene, his face unreadable. He saw the fierce, unconditional love between the father and son. He saw his own daughter standing with them, her hand resting protectively on Liam's shoulder. They looked like a family. He had a choice to make. He could eliminate the threat, hand Liam over to his scientists, and erase this entire nightmare. Or he could acknowledge the truth. This monster had saved his daughter, protected his home, and loved his son with a ferocity Alistair had to respect. The official story Alistair announced, his voice carrying the weight of a final judgment, will be that a deranged kidnapper broke onto the estate. My security team neutralized him. You, Mr. Blackwood, assisted and were injured in the process. Liam looked up, stunned. You and your son cannot stay here. Alistair continued, his tone cold and final. It's too dangerous. For you and for us. I will provide you with new identities, a home far away from here, and enough money to live comfortably. You will disappear. He looked at Isabella, a flicker of something, perhaps regret, in his eyes. This is the only way. It was a reprieve, but also a sentence. Liam and Noah were safe, but he had to leave Isabella. He looked at her, and the silent promise that passed between them was more powerful than any words. This was not the end. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft pink glow over the manicured lawns, Liam held his son's hand. They were exiles once more, but this time they weren't just running from something. They were heading toward a future where, someday, they might not have to run at all. Liam looked back one last time at Isabella, who stood on the porch with her father. Her expression was one of heartbreak, but also of unshakable resolve. She would not give up on him, and he would spend the rest of his life being worthy of that faith, waiting for the day he could return. And so Liam Blackwood's life, once turned upside down by a heroic act, was set on a new, uncertain path. He stepped out of the fire and into a world of impossible love, dangerous secrets, and unthinkable choices. As a single father, His only mission was to protect his son. But in saving Isabella, he found a second reason to fight, a reason to hope for a future he never thought possible. Their story is far from over. It's a testament to the idea that love can be found in the most unexpected of places, and that the greatest strength often comes from embracing the very thing that makes us different. What do you think will happen next? Will Alistair Sterling's cold heart ever truly thaw? Will Liam and Isabella find their way back to each other against all odds? Their journey is just beginning, filled with danger, passion, and the fierce, undying hope for a family united. If you were captivated by Liam and Isabella's story and want to follow their epic romance, please don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good twist, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable tales. Your support means the world, and it ensures we can keep bringing these stories to life. Thank you for listening.